Great. Thank you so much, Yasmin, for this very kind introduction. I'm excited to be here today and very grateful to have had this opportunity to exchange today on this fireside chat with Mrs. Lambropoulos. So, welcome, Mrs. Lambropoulos. We're happy to have you with us today.
Happy to be here with you guys today. Thank you so much, Tara and Yasmin.
I'm going to introduce you briefly. Of course, this could be much longer, but we'll keep it short for the sake of time. And I'll go over the main elements of your biography for those of you who don't know you as well. So, born and raised in Saint Laurent, Emmanuella Lambropoulos has been proudly representing the people of the riding that she calls home in the House of Commons since she was elected in 2017. Upon graduating from McGill University in 2013, Mrs. Lambropoulos began her teaching career, teaching history, geography, and ethics and religious culture at various high schools on the island of Montreal, including at Saint Laurent's very own Laurel Hill Academy. It is there that she also worked as a resource aide with students who had learning disabilities and autism for several years prior to becoming officially a teacher. Mrs. Lambropoulos completed her Master's of Arts in Educational Leadership in 2020. So a terrible year, but a good one for you at least. Throughout her years as an educator, Mrs. Lambropoulos became passionate about social change and decided to enter politics to help make Canada a fairer place for all, while exploring another one of her passions. She has become an advocate for equality, inclusion, and diversity, with women's issues and minority issues being a major focus of her work. On that note, I do want to congratulate you for recently being elected as chair of the National Liberal Women's Caucus. So welcome again. I'll stop there. I'm sure I could continue, but we'll get started in exchange in hope that we can give a bit of guidance and inspiration to the people on this webinar today. So what if we started with a bit of a more concrete description of what you do? I think a lot of people hear about members of parliament, but it's not always clear what does it mean and what does a day in your life look like?
Thank you, Tara, for the question, and happy to answer. So basically, for me, what I think that I think different people go into politics for different reasons, and an MP's day will differ depending on what their goals are or what type of MP they want to be. For me, one of the main priorities that I have is really making sure that I properly represent the riding of Saint Laurent, so that I'm properly representing the people that I represent, that elect me to be a member of Parliament in Canada. It's important for me to really hear back. And so on a daily basis, I read through all of the emails that come to my account. I don't always answer them immediately because I'm always doing a whole bunch of things at once, but I want to at least see and hear the perspectives that I get from different residents in my community. And so I get them directly sent to my phone. So I'm constantly, whether it's, 7 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, I'm constantly getting notifications on my phone about what people think of what's going on, which is great because it gives me a very good idea of what I should be saying once I get to the House of Commons. So in a regular sitting week, the House begins at 11 a.m. and it ends at 6:30 p.m. on a regular day. Of course, there are emergency debates that take place pretty often, I would say, and they go until midnight. So that's like a regular sitting day. We also have committee meetings, and I sit on two committees. I sit on the Committee for the Status of Women, and I sit on the Committee of National Defense. So as you can imagine with what's going on in the world right now, that's a really important and touchy committee. And we're constantly looking at ways that Canada can become more protected, better protected, and ways that we can better support our allies. So in a given week, you have two committee meetings for every committee that you sit on. So that's 4 hours a week per committee that take place. There are pre-committee meetings because we meet, obviously it's partisan, and so the Liberals need to be on side with what their position is, the Conservatives need to be on side with what their position is, and all the parties need to do the same. So that takes up a lot of our time. of course. As you mentioned, I just got elected as chair of Women's Caucus. So these are weekly 2-hour meetings that we have every Wednesday. And so the preparation that I have to do in order to actually come up with and make sure that the meetings are relevant and meaningful beforehand, and then afterwards, the follow-up that I have to do takes up some of my time. The meeting itself, making sure that I take all of the concerns of the women in our caucus and bring them back to the Prime Minister, to the House leadership team, to the Whip's office, and everyone else that is involved in making the lives of female MPs a little bit better, especially now during this last few weeks. It's been a really hectic time. So we've been dealing very much as we've been working as like an advocacy group for the female MPs more than anything else. And it's important to do so because we need female representation. And if the women that are around the table don't feel like they can fully access the roles as members of parliament, that's a huge issue, right? We're already only 30% in the Canadian Parliament. So it's really, my goal is to make sure that the women's voices in our caucus are heard and that they're amplified more than they would be if we didn't exist. Another important thing that we do, and the most important, I would say, is that we have Quebec caucus or our regional caucuses, and we have national caucus. So these are each 2-hour meetings a week where all MPs have the right to express the views of their constituents and to express the views that they hold themselves, to share with the Prime Minister and with other members of the caucus and ministers, of course, what path they should take to move forward. So this, for me, is my number one tool to really have any kind of influence in the government and the way that the government works and the decisions that are taken at the federal level. And you know, I'll get into how I got the confidence to be the loud voice that I am up until now, because I wasn't always. It took a lot of time to get to that point, but I would say that this is the most important meeting of the week because we have the voice, the ears of the Prime Minister. So a given week of an MP in a sitting week, I didn't even mention question period. I didn't even mention debates, which take place in the House of Commons while we're on House duty. It's packed, completely packed. So during a sitting week, I don't even, I want my constituents not to expect an answer from me. Of course, my office is working hard in order to get back to them and everything, but the priority really needs to be that. I didn't mention votes either. This takes up a lot of time too. And in a given constituency week, the work is really getting back in touch with my constituents, with businesses in the riding, and making sure that I'm doing the work on the ground. Sorry for the very long answer.
No, it's okay. Well, it's interesting because based on your answer, we realize how packed things can be. So fascinating for me. I never thought there would be so much work involved and so many meetings because ultimately it doesn't leave you as much time to focus on answering and, as you said, everything else that needs to happen in a week. It's a very concrete understanding of what a week can look like. It's also fascinating to know that you're looking at emails. I think in many cases, other politicians will tend to not look at their emails, allow someone else to manage it. I think I'm sure you're not always the one answering them, but at least reading them keeps you close, and it must have a great impact on how you're able to influence and represent, as you said, the members of your writing. So very impressed by that, especially when your days are already so full and pretty packed. So I hope that everyone listening is getting a better sense of what it looks like and are not being discouraged because, of course, we do want people to consider politics and not feel like it's too overwhelming. I'm sure when you're passionate, time passes and you feel excited to be participating in all of these meetings. And maybe just following on that, so you weren't always in politics. You started with a bit of a different career, initially as a teacher, and today we are in a world where our generation particularly is less likely to stay in the same career all their life. There's even some polls conducted in the US that suggest that even in the last year, 32% of people aged between 25 and 44 have already considered a career change, and 29% of people have completely changed fields since they started their first job after college. So it's not just you. I think it's definitely a tendency. But maybe for people who are listening to us today and are studying a particular field, what would you give in terms of advice if they're considering a transition, a career, or maybe just explain to us how your transition went and what was relevant to consider during that process?
So I think that anyone who's considering a transition needs to, at least before completely making the switch, needs to feel the ground of what that would look like. I was involved in the Liberal Party from before for several years. I had worked on elections. I had done certain things. I had gone to conventions, policy conventions. So I did have a good idea of what I was getting into. Of course, I didn't know the level and the commitment and all. I assumed, but I couldn't know until I actually got into it. Um, but for any career change, I think it's important to, whether it's, taking a class in the field that you're considering so that you can see if this is a subject matter you want to be dealing with on a daily basis, getting your feet wet with regards to, maybe volunteering in another area and seeing or speaking to people in other fields and kind of discovering what exactly life would be like if you were doing that fully as well. Because you don't want to jump around too many times. You want to make sure that you're making a decision that's wise and that you're not risking too much while you're at it. But I definitely think that keeping an open mind for all opportunities that arise ahead of us is important, is key. Um, and also, like, really sitting within yourself and asking yourself, am I happy doing what I'm currently doing? Because if you're not happy doing what you're doing, then there's no point in doing it. If you're considering a career change just because you're curious, then, you might want to take a look and make sure you're doing the right thing. But if you're making the change because you're unhappy, then I think, you need to put yourself first. And even though I say that, I want to say it with a bit of caution because it's happened in the past where I joined something, whether it was a group or I joined, I changed careers or whatever, and I didn't necessarily like it in the first year or in the first few months. I felt like I was the newbie. It's not always easy to, integrate very well right away. And so the advice that I would give is don't quit as soon as you feel uncomfortable because then you'll never grow and you'll never understand, you'll never see what the potential is of that place. And in my experience, anytime that I have stuck it through, either to end a contract that was, for a given amount of time, or um, to kind of give myself a bit more time to really see if I enjoyed it and try different things to improve myself within my area of work. I've always felt that I've benefited, and in the end, I really actually did enjoy what I was doing. But it took time, whether that was a year or two, to really get the feel for it. So I wouldn't say, switch as soon as you get that feeling, but um, you know, test yourself, see if you can improve yourself because anything that you do in your current career or in a new one that can build upon the skills that you already have will benefit you no matter where you end up going. Right. So if public speaking is your problem and you have an opportunity to speak out and to share your voice and your thoughts with others, challenge yourself and make that something that you become good at and that no longer stresses you out because that's not only going to benefit you here, it's going to benefit you in other fields as well. So just kind of strengthen that base that you have. Look at different opportunities that may come up, that may arise, and maybe don't switch full time. Maybe switch partially and slowly get yourself into that new field. I don't know. Those are just some ideas.
No, it's a lot of great ideas. I like the idea of not doing it all at once. And I think you gave a great example of using volunteering as a tool to do that. It's the best opportunity really to get to know whether you're going to like it. And maybe in some cases, as you mentioned, you'll realize it's something you want to keep doing on a voluntary basis. It is something you like, it is something that challenges you, that you're learning more, but it's not something that you're going to be doing full time or that will become your new career. So doing it that way still allows you to grow, I think, but it gives you a bit of that two-step process to be able to say, okay, never mind, I was curious to look into something else, but I might not want to actually change forever. Um,
And
it's
in
one
today's day and
approach.
age, I also find that, no matter what it is that you enjoy doing, if you have a very, like if you're very passionate about something and it's not necessarily what you're doing right now, but you continue doing it on a voluntary basis or for fun, if you continue doing that, eventually down the line, there may be opportunity to create a
Right.
business and make a business out of it and to do that
Mhm.
full time. You know, like if it's really a passion of yours, you'll find a way to get the tools that you need in order to make that your main thing eventually. And you have to have the confidence in yourself to be able to do it. And you need to have the drive and the ambition to be able to see it through.
Mhm.
But anything is possible. And I think that we have to have that mindset as well. That, you know, growth mindset that anything we want to do, we'll be able to do if we put in the time and the effort and if we actually give ourselves fully.
And I think it's key too because you're keeping that option, right? So you don't want to get to a point in your career when you say, I no longer want to do this, but what else am I going to do? Now, if you've kept that passion on the side, if you continue to be involved, it's going to be much easier to get started. You're not starting from scratch. You're continuing to nurture something that you've already started, and you won't feel stuck, right? So you won't feel that feeling of, okay, well, I've only been a lawyer my entire life. What else am I going to be able to do? I can't start over overnight. But if you have those things on the side, I think it's definitely key. I love the way you're talking about challenging yourself and how we're all we all struggle when we're not good at something. And I think it takes a bit of ego to just say, hey, I might not be the best at this, but I still do have something to learn out of this. And then eventually we'll get better like everyone else. And so I do want to stick with it. For you personally, what made you do the switch, or what was the, I don't want to say triggering event, but maybe the, if you want to share one thing that really made an impact in your decision to transition.
Can you repeat the last part of that question? I'm not hearing you
Oh,
very well.
sorry. I meant, is there anything, any triggering event, or even just any element that helped you in making your own transition that you want to share with us today?
Um, yeah, so you mean when I made the transition from education to politics?
Exactly.
Um, from the very beginning, when I was 17, 18, and I entered politics, I had a little voice in the back of my mind saying, hey, maybe one day I could be an MP. And it was because I saw a couple of politicians that were females at the time, like Eleni Bakopanos and Eva Nassif, who were either candidates or who were within the Quebec sphere of politics. And seeing them kind of put that little voice in my head and made me get involved a little bit more and made me stay involved for several years. And what I would say is that of course, an opportunity arose that would only happen under certain circumstances. I never expected this opportunity to happen. And I always told myself that, you know, when my predecessor were to end his career in politics and when he were to retire, then I would perhaps consider going into politics. Now, I didn't expect that it would happen that soon or the way that it did. But when
Right.
it did, I also, a little voice went off in my head, and people contacted me, friends who I had told this to, saying, hey, what you said, you know, was going to happen or that you were waiting for kind of just happened. Are you going to, who's your campaign manager? And these little voices that these friends kind of pushing me in that direction made me really think about it for 2 days, um, speak to my family about it, see what they thought, and they didn't think it was a good idea. But regardless of that, it kind of just made me think if I don't do this now, then the next opportunity is going to be way down the line because other young people were going to run for the same position. And I saw that as like, you know, well, if other people run and they're young, well, when's my next opportunity going to arise? Because I would not run in another riding. My passion is representing the people in my riding because I've grown up and I've been raised here my whole life. So this is the riding I know and call home, and I always have. I wouldn't just enter politics to represent a different riding. Like that's, I don't really mind what happens in a different riding. I care what happens here. So I knew that if it was not now, it wouldn't come up for a long time. And that kind of pushed me to decide that, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I mean, yeah, okay, I had a career. I was doing a master's degree. I was doing a lot of things that, and I was in a really good position in my career as well. Like I was on the track to tenure track, which meant that a year more and I would have a job for life. But I was at this place where I knew that it was now or never. And so I just gave it my all and decided to go for it.
Great. So an opportunity arose, you took it, and I love how you mentioned that you had those voices and people supporting you. So maybe just something for everyone to remember. You should say out loud what you wish for. You should kind of make it as something real. Put it into words. Really, just express
And
it to
write
the
it
world,
down.
and it will
Write it
happen.
down.
Exactly. And
I
then
feel like
people will.
goal setting and planning to accomplish every goal that you set for yourself is key. And literally, it's the key to success. If you asked me if I had to pick one thing, um, my little notebook that I write my ideas in, and it's not journaling, but it's like, hey, I think this is what I want to do next year, and this is how I want to improve this year. And then just writing it down makes it a very like touchable goal. You know, it's like very attainable once you've written it down because you know what you want to do and you can kind of break it down into smaller steps.
Yeah. No, that's great. And telling other people, I feel keeps you accountable too. So you had people remind you, right? Like you said this, now you should do it, and they can encourage you. So that's really great. Maybe moving on to something a bit more specific to McGill. So we're all here as McGill alumni, and we have people joining who might happen or might be at McGill. I was myself a McGill alumni, and I know in many ways McGill had an impact on my career path. It opened some doors on the international stage where its reputation precedes. And I also, for having studied law, there's a lot of people who went into politics actually who are currently into politics that I studied with, whether it was teacher or um, even students along me. So I'm wondering for you personally, how would you say McGill kind of prepared you for what you're doing today?
So, I got involved in student politics back in the day. I was the president of the McGill Hellenic Students Association. So, and why it was really just to see if I could meet other Greek kids that were studying at McGill, if I could build relationships also with people who lived in Greece or who were from Greece just studying here, because I was very connected to my culture and I grew up with it. So, you know, for me, fun on a Saturday night was going to a Greek restaurant and dancing Greek afterwards. Like that was what my thing was. So I started off doing student politics and getting involved in different organizations. It wasn't just the McGill Hellenic Students Association, it was also a HEPA, which is another Greek organization that has a lot to do with education, philanthropic work, and promotes these different values of Hellenism. So I was involved in different types of things while I was working and going to school. Um, so multitasking was definitely something that McGill helped me with in a way because I was doing a bunch of stuff at the same time. Um, I think I think Tara might be we might be losing her. I'm not sure if you guys still hear me.
We can still hear you,
Okay,
Emmanuella.
so I'll
Thanks.
continue.
Yeah. Oh, and I see
Um,
Tara's coming back, but yeah, just keep on
okay,
and
sorry about that.
no problem.
Um, I also was in education. I did my bachelor's in education and then I did my master's in education while I was a full-time teacher. And I did that part-time. And one of my teachers, Noel Burke, I don't know if anyone else has had him, but he's he used to work for the school board as well at the school board level, and he worked for the Ministry of Education as well. And so he really brought the angle of education and looking at it from the politics perspective, the policy perspective, and that really, you know, because I was interested in politics and I was already involved in some level, to some level, we would speak a little bit about it. And I told him, oh, one day, sir, maybe I'll be the Minister of Education. Now I'm in a completely different area. There's no Minister of Education at the federal level, but you know, it was just something I was always kind of interested in. And he spoke to me about how politics can shape, you know, and obviously I knew this already, but he made it more concrete. The fact that politics and policy shapes the way that our systems are run and the way that our education systems run, our health system, and things that are really im impact that really impact society. Now, I had never been involved at the provincial level, so that wasn't really where I knew people or where I knew how it worked. And so I just kind of continued on the federal path, and that's how I found myself where I am today.
Awesome. I'm sorry, I did lose you for a second there, but I get the gist of it. So, what I like is your passion is intertwined, right? So, you had a passion for teaching, education, you had a passion for politics, and you had all of it kind of come together.
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Hello.
I hear you now.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I think I
No,
had
that's okay.
an issue with my connection, but I did hear you, however. So I wanted to say I like how all your passions came together. So in a way, you've loved education, teaching, you have an interest for politics. He kind of put together how those two could really influence each other, and that's wonderful. And even when I listen to all of your answers, so when you're talking about your writing, so you have a passion for that area, serving those citizens. And when you talk about also the associations that you got involved with, it was connected to your identity through your community being Greek, of Greek ethnicity. So I like that everything you're answering is so genuine and so authentic to who you are. Really, none of those things can be duplicated. You can't tell anyone on this call today, hey, do the same thing as me, because really you picked things that matter to you. And I think that's the lesson for anyone here is don't just follow the one path. There isn't one path. You just pick and choose things that matter to you.
Build your own path and journey, right?
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention as well was during my master's degree, I had to switch. I originally wanted to become a principal, and that was when I entered this master's, it was for administration. So after a certain amount of teaching, I would want to eventually switch to admin and help shape the way that a school was run. And I wanted to do that and was inspired to do that because I didn't necessarily like the way one of the schools in particular that I was working at was run. Um, I'll say that it wasn't Lauren Hill because I absolutely loved Lauren Hill, but I'm not going to mention the name of the school. And I didn't like the way it was run. So it inspired me to kind of look at what was going wrong and what I can do to make it better. And then I wanted to get the education to back that as well. Um, and originally it was course based because I wanted to learn as many like tangible things as possible in order to be able to do that and learn as many of the skills as I can in order to be able to do that. But eventually, when I got into politics, I couldn't continue doing courses because I wasn't able to attend classes at McGill. So I switched to project based. So it's not a thesis. I didn't do a thesis, but I did two projects. And one of the two projects was really specifically based on one of the things I'm most passionate about, which is ending gender stereotypes and the way that they impact the choices that are made by women and men, and all of the things that come together in that as well. So ending gender-based violence, ending toxic masculinity, ending certain things that lead us to being in the position that we haven't been able to get out of until now, no matter how much funding has been thrown at the problem. So the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because it very much as it didn't start out having much of an impact in the way that I was doing my work in Ottawa, now that I'm the chair of the Women's Caucus and that I'm on the Status of Women Committee, all of the work that I did there, which again I was extremely passionate about, I'm able to bring here. And so we're literally working concretely on making like this project somewhat a reality, in some ways. Of course, I'm not the only one doing it, but in my committees, I will ask questions that lead to other people, witnesses telling us that we need similar programs to the ones that I was talking about back when I was in education. Whether it's the government funding educational programs that will help talk about healthy relationships and teach kids about boundaries so that they get out of abusive relationships early on, or so that boys could recognize the not so positive traits that they may have, that, or not traits, but behaviors that they may display that are not necessarily appropriate or don't make the best relationships. So things like that that I've taken a look at in a deeper level through research, I'm actually able to bring to the
Very much.
table today to help with an issue that I think is of most importance. So
Mhm. It's
trying to
never
tie
lost.
in together a bunch of different, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's key to remember that when you do something with passion, you'll find a way to use it one way or another, whether it's the soft skills, whether it's the actual content itself, the research, the work you did on its own, you'll find a way to tie it to what you're doing. And maybe it's also a lesson learned that there are things you want to accomplish in life, or maybe, when you ask a child, what's your dream job? And then down the line, they tell you, well, I ended up doing this instead. Fine, but maybe you're still accomplishing what you meant to accomplish through a different career, right? Like it sounds like everything you wanted to get to or that mattered to you maybe seemed to be something you should do through teaching, and now you're showing to people that you could do it through politics. That really it's yet another path to accomplish the same goals that you have. So really great. I think it just tells people that there isn't just one way, that you can always find different paths, and that you should never let go of things you care about because, as you mentioned earlier, put your energy into it and it will pay off one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so at McGill too, I think you had mentioned to me last time we spoke that you didn't take courses like on politics, of course, but was there any course or anyone we talked about teacher who kind of further enhance your interest into politics, but for
I
people
think I
hearing this,
mentioned this when we lost you, but I had mentioned Noel Burke, and I basically said
yes,
that yeah, we would talk about how he was in the ministry before,
right.
so we spoke about that potential of provincial politics, and
Mm-hmm.
because I would ask a lot about, well, why is the system the way it is, and if this is what's needed, why doesn't it just happen if we already have the answer, like where, and that's where he kind of pushed the political will on
Mm-hmm.
me and said, people working in the Ministry of Education are not people with backgrounds in education. So the people who are there are not necessarily the people who should be there and
Equipped.
are making
Yeah.
decisions about our children and what they're learning. And they have no idea, like they've studied it maybe, but they have no practical background.
Mm-hmm. Like you
So,
do. Yeah.
that's why it's important to make sure that if anybody on the call does want to enter politics at any level, you don't need to have studied politics. What you need to do is you need to have some kind of experience on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
working with people and knowing what works best in certain areas, right? Like
Yeah. Be an
I'm
expert in your own
unfortunately
area.
not at the provincial level, but even the fact that I've worked with organizations in the past and I know what types of funding lapses there are and how difficult it is for organizations to receive funding in order to help people with some of the major problems that we're trying to deal with in government,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
helps me lend my voice to that and to try to make things a little bit more efficient so that we can help people in a better way, more
Mm-hmm.
effective way. So things like that, people who you need to have done something before you enter politics. I don't suggest going into it right after like right after you're done school or while you're still in your bachelor's, because some level of education is definitely important before you enter, and then having some experience as well is important before you enter.
Mm-hmm. I was going to touch more on courses themselves, right? Like, so is there anything that you did, like you were mentioning studying the women, gender equality, all of that really helped you down the line. But is there any way that people can use their courses towards getting them closer to a politics, not career, but really just, I don't know if you know what I mean, just leveraging it in a way?
No,
No, it's
not
really,
really.
okay.
Um, it was more my involvement that I used. It was the fact that I had coached tennis. It was the fact that I taught in the schools that I represent like of the riding I represent. It was the fact that I only attended schools in the riding that I represent. It was the fact that I worked at Cinema Guzzo in the riding that I represent, and I worked at Jean Coutu in the riding that I
Yeah.
represent, and I
So it's
worked
about people.
in the summer camp of the riding I represent. And it was all about throughout, like ever since I was 15, I began working and I never stopped. And I was always, in school and working at the same time. So I knew a lot of people, and I think that that's the key in politics. It's knowing a lot of people. It's making sure that people see you, and obviously, if you're a slacker, then they're not gonna put their faith in you. But if you've had a positive impact on their kid at some point or another, and they see how much passion you work with, then they're gonna realize that, you know what, maybe this is someone that would be a great representative for me. So it's about that. It's about before you even decide to go into politics, I think it's about building those networks and making sure that you're giving your all in everything that you that you take part in.
Right. So you started really early. It seems like it was a passion from early on, and you were very involved in your writing and even in politics through associations. Is there a time when it's too late? I mean, let's say someone on this call who says, "Hey, I've never done anything. I don't have a writing that I specifically identify to just yet. I don't know where to start." And it seems like Mrs. Lambropoulos is doing great because ultimately she had kind of built all the bricks to the mention early on. I'm too late now. Would you feel this way? Is there an
It's
age
never
when?
it's never too late to do anything. Um, I'm considering my next, like step after politics, which I don't know when that'll be, but if it's in the next, again, I don't know what it'll be, but I've thought about other things that I'm really interested in doing that have nothing to do with politics or that are a continuation of what I had done before in some cases, and in some cases totally different. And I've considered, hey, maybe I can take a class in September and see if that's something I really like. And if I do, eventually I can pursue that as well. So I think it's a matter of knowing and feeling what you'd be interested in doing and then taking that first step, right? And writing it down, like I said, writing it down. And um, if it's a field that you want to enter, then of course, like some education in that field is key, and taking classes in that field is key to start. Not for politics, but for anything else, pretty much. Um, if it's, um, I know somebody, for example, who she did her entire degree in economics, and now she's like an IT specialist because she did like a super course, and she's working for Spotify making 120K American. And like she's 26. You know, there are so many ways of getting started and of really like fully putting yourself into different areas. But again, taking that first step, getting someone that you can speak to who's in the same position as the one that you've envisioned for yourself, seeing what that would actually be like before you get started, and just kind of doing things that make you feel happy. And I think it's also important to take care of ourselves because that has a lot to do with our confidence level too. So making sure that, you're eating right, that you're sleeping well, that you're exercising. These things I feel play a really big role in giving us that feeling that we've accomplished something for ourselves and that we can do anything. I know it's as basic as something that you could do on a daily basis to implement changes in your life and that help your health and stuff. But I think that these things, like when I actually do that and I focus on it and I make time for it,
Everything else is better.
even though it's not always easy, it makes me feel like I can accomplish anything I want in the world. So even the most basic things, like take care of yourself and make sure that you're opening your eyes to what the opportunities are in front of you, and start off as a volunteer, start off as, taking a class. You like doing this for fun, take a class. You like photography, take a course, do it for fun, meet other like-minded individuals that have the same passion. Talk about it, like you said. Talk about it with your friends, with your family. Make that goal something that you can visualize so much that you can actually know exactly what steps to take in order to become that. Break it down into as many steps as you can. I think anybody on this call is able to take whatever goal they want and to break it down. As long as you have some clear thinking abilities, you can pretty much do it. And you can do some quick research and figure out what exactly is needed to get this certain degree or to get, certified in a certain area or whatever it might be.
Yes. No, that's a lot of, I mean, you touched upon so many things, but I think you're giving everyone on this call a lot of tips that are super relevant, right? So you go through education is one of them. I mean, always making sure that you go get the learnings and the expertise that you need. I think we can never emphasize enough that it's in never ends, right? You don't just go to college and, oh, I'm done studying and done learning. you're thinking of taking courses still, you took some 2020. I love the idea of constantly continuing, right? We call continuous education absolutely key nowadays. So that's definitely one of the tools that people on this call should remember. I like that you mentioned mentoring. So getting in touch with people who are in the area that you're interested in can only help you. You can exchange with them, see how it was for them. They can guide you through the process. So that's another great tool or consideration to have. And before doing all of that, mental health, I've not talked about enough. And just hearing you, who definitely has a packed schedule, tell everyone here that you still need, like any other human being, this time to do and be taking care of yourself. It's something that people don't talk about enough, right? There used to be this sense of I'm a Wonder Woman. I don't need to sleep. I don't need to eat. Who needs to eat? I just do conferences all day long. That's not true. And you're putting it really well to people here is do it. You feel better. You're more confident, and it will be better for everyone. And ultimately, you will get closer to your goals. So mental health being another key element.
Hugging a cat helps too.
Oh, yes. Pet therapy is absolutely lovely. I can attest to that. I have my dogs actually joining the call right now. We're trying to join this call. Yeah, so I think you're giving a lot of great ideas to everyone on this call. I like that the first step is also just sitting down and thinking about what you like, what's your passion, and making sure you kind of put those goals. So do a mood board, put it out there, and it will become true. I don't know if anyone has
Another
read.
quick thing I would
Right.
want to mention actually is, you know, sometimes we have more than one idea of what we would want to do, right? And that's okay because it means that, you know, there's a lot of different things we're interested in and that we can make a career out of. So, I think that every step you take, and this is something that I've mentioned in the past, whether it's, you know, you're getting into a program, like there are some students that might be on the call who are doing like a post, you know, who are doing like a master's or a PhD. There are, for those people, I think sometimes you might feel like you're wasting your time and you just want to leave the program that you're in. I think it's important to know that it's never a waste of time, never a waste of time. So, yeah, you shouldn't feel like you have to stay forced into something that you're really not enjoying. But some people start getting these doubts in their minds that they're on the right path, right? I feel like that's a really big crisis that university
Yeah.
students face. And I think, you know, even people in the beginning of the career, they're like, I just studied all these years and I did this, and now I don't even know if this is what I want to do with my life. Well, you didn't waste your time. Even your work experience is not a waste of time. That's something you're putting on your CV. It's something that will make you look like somebody who, you know, had this whole level of experience behind them and of skills that they've built through that experience, that'll help them in other areas as well. And even if you start planning for one career path that you want, like, for example, if you begin registering for courses that you think you might like, and down the line you realize that maybe this isn't what you want to do and your idea has changed, these courses are not going to take away from what you've been able to do. They're only going to add eventually, and you can use everything that you have in your bank of experience and knowledge to, you know, do something else that you actually really want to do later on. So everything that you learn is beneficial. Like, I think it's important to remember that and to look at that, look at things from that perspective as well.
You get an extra kilo time in translating how certain skills that you've developed in an area are applicable to another. And I think that's what people also need to remember. You have soft skills. So some people might say, I mean, how does teaching make you a good politician? But I'm sure you can use
So you
your
probably asked me that before, and I told you nothing.
You,
But
you did, but of course there is. I mean, I'm sure you were able to convince people to say, look, maybe, and you did mention obviously that you had the hands-on experience and you could influence decision making around or policy around education because you lived through it, and also your volunteering on the side equipped you really well. But other than that, I'm sure many soft skills of a teacher can totally be transposable, and it's the case for teaching, but it's probably the case for everything else. So just remembering to also sell yourself well I think if you come off saying, hey, I used to be an accountant and now I want to be a fashion designer, and people will look at you and be like, okay. But if you find a way to just make an argument in your favor and sell yourself off, I'm sure you can find all these things that ultimately make past experience relevant. I'm looking at the time flight, so I have maybe two last questions for you, unless we get more questions from the public. So looking at a question more specific to when you started your career, is there anything you wish you knew when you entered federal politics that you would tell your former self right now, if you could?
I think I'm happy that I learned it as I went, because if I was told certain things, I still wouldn't have the confidence to just get up there and speak my mind or speak the mind of my constituents, or I wouldn't know like the right avenues to take unless I actually did it myself and learned it myself. So there are some things that experience is the only way to become better at and to understand. I had people telling me, giving me some pointers at the beginning of my career, but I still didn't feel like I was really good at it until a couple of years in, to be honest. And a couple of years in, I saw the accomplishments. I saw how effective I could be as an MP, because I would speak to ministers and then the things that I would ask for would actually happen, because I wasn't the only one asking. I would find ways to work with my colleagues to make things happen. I would figure out how to speak to the ministers in order to make things happen. I would figure out how to grow my own friendships and relationships within the party as well, within my caucus. And I think that in politics, that's key. You can't do anything alone. You have to do things working with others.
Allies.
So the answer to that is like, I think I wouldn't be as confident as I am today and as effective as I think I am if I had just been told what this is. I think I really needed to take my time and learn it slowly and make sure that, I act with confidence whenever I do say anything, whenever I present a motion, whenever I make a speech in the House of Commons, whenever I ask a question. All of my interactions now come with confidence and with meaning and with the direction that I want to go in and that I actually want to accomplish something in. Whereas in the beginning, it was like, okay, I guess I'm going to stand up and ask a question. Like I had no idea what I was doing or why I was doing it. And now because of my experience and because I've been there for long enough, and I'm really starting to, I started a couple years ago, but I think even the pandemic helped, not necessarily having to be there in the house with 5 cameras on you. I'm much better at, communicating
Right.
when I'm looking at a screen and there's one camera on me. It doesn't feel like it's that public,
That's
even though it
intimidating,
is,
yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a matter of experience and trying it out, because there's no way to better learn than doing it yourself.
No, that's great. And we can learn as much as we want at school, or as we say, sur les bancs d'école, but ultimately, at the end of the day, doing it just gives you that confidence. And I love how much you talk about confidence. And maybe the last question will be more around being a woman in politics, being a young woman in politics of Greek origin, maybe too, because I think you're adding to all this intersectionality and, I don't know, if stereotypes or things that have been put on your way that made it harder. So, what advice would you maybe give to young female students who are wishing to be more involved in civil society?
I think the answer is just be unapologetic, go with force, and recognize that we belong there. It might take a little while, and yes, there were obstacles. Absolutely, there were obstacles, but I found a way to call them out. Like when people were being, you know, different towards me than they were towards someone else, and I saw that it was either because of my age or because I was a woman or because I was an ethnic woman in Quebec. I mean, I'm considered an ethnic woman. So, um, I've called out, people within my caucus in front of the prime minister. And I haven't mentioned names, but they knew exactly who I was talking about and came to apologize afterwards. But it's a matter of knowing that you're not only speaking up for yourself when you speak up, you're speaking up for all of the women that are in the same boat as you and for the women who are gonna be in the same boat as you one day. So not to be shy and not to be afraid of actually saying what's right and what things should be like. I think that you can use being a woman to your advantage a lot of the time. So we need to learn how to leverage that as well. And the fact that, they say that unless there's 30% representation around a table of women or of any group, their voices won't actually count. But finding a way to speak in a way that you know that it'll count and kind of being, I know that it's awful and it hardens people sometimes, but in some cases you learn how to be a little bit aggressive. And I don't want to say that that's great. I feel like I needed to take that path in order to get to the sweet path. And it wasn't going to naturally occur because I was feeling that being sweet wasn't getting me the reactions I wanted from my colleagues. So at one point, I needed to like break that and be like, hey, this is, the way that you're acting right now. And I need you to recognize it because we all represent the same amount of people and we all have the right to express ourselves, our voices, and we all have the same role here. So, you better start
And
acting
you're
like it.
equal. Yeah, no,
And
for
then
sure.
eventually, like after, time has passed, now a long time has passed since I needed to do that. And so now I can be my authentic self
Right.
and actually make that difference because I've built those relationships and I've been with the same people for so long and they know like we cannot act like this with her because she's gonna call us out in front of everybody.
No,
So
yeah.
that's my advice.
No, I think
Just,
it's important. Yeah, no, speak up. Speak up.
yeah, and if
Be
you
who
feel
you
like
are.
you're not being listened to, because often I feel women have expressed this to me as well. Like I'm not the only one who's felt that. And in certain groups as well, like there are some women that'll be listened to and others that won't necessarily because of their last name or because of the color of their skin. Absolutely, like you need to stand up for yourself because no one else is going to stand up for you. And once you do, like you'll start to notice things completely changing.
Yeah. It's funny sometimes people say that you need to build your credibility first and then it gets easier. But the truth is you shouldn't have to build your credibility more than anyone else. Like there's no reason why, oh, I'm a young woman, so people are allowed to need more reassurance. They shouldn't. You've been elected. I mean, that should be enough proof that you're able to do what you're doing and that people want it to be represented by you. So I like that you don't have the fear to call them out. And I've heard about the 30% that you're referring to. And I think what I've heard a lot is until you get to the 30% representation that you need for your voice to matter, find allies, right? Because you can call out someone, but it has a lot more impact when others also call it out and you're not alone. So hopefully there are people out there who are not women or not young, but are still willing to kind of call it out and be there for you.
And I think that that's another key as well. Like within my own committees where I sat in different committees, because I've been on different ones this whole time, um, I found that my friendships with my male colleagues within that committee definitely helped me be more impactful as well because they'll back you up and they'll be like, yeah, that's a great idea, Emmanuella. Thank you for bringing it up. Like, and then once he says it, apparently it's true.
Suddenly,
So,
yeah.
which sucks, right? But I mean,
They use it.
use it exactly. And again, this whole education thing, like that gender stereotype education that we should be teaching our kids, well, hopefully like that starts soon because I think that this change needs to come from the way that we're brought up. And it won't happen, if we start telling people to act a certain way in the workforce. It needs to be taught in homes and at school in order for that to change. But until then, be unapologetic.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people on this call can think of situations that have happened to them in school nowadays, even though we think things are better. So there's still a long way to go. It often makes me think of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who's definitely a great speaker for the women cause and without taking any politics sides or anything, just on the women positioning, I think she shows us, like you do, that you have to be confident, and the confidence that you're showing just on this call, it's a lot of inspiration for young women, right? Who can look up to you and say, hey, I don't need to be 60 years old to suddenly sound wise, and I don't need to have been born and raised, I don't know, or be a Quebecer origin or anything like that. So it's important, and I'm saddened to hear that you had to kind of go through a rougher approach to first be heard, but I think it's important that you did, and hopefully it will become easier with time. But there still is a bit of a battle to be fought. So
Also,
thank
we
you
have,
so
we have
much.
to take it from the perspective of we become stronger when we do go through these things. And, hopefully it doesn't affect or impact our mental health or our health that much. But if we can get stronger through the experiences that we've had, then, we should see it as a positive in the end.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. That's a very positive way of looking at it, so that people remember. You can always. I think you've made this the common theme throughout. You can take something positive out of everything you studied, every experience you went through. Use your passion and make the most of everything you've learned or experienced, or your even personal journey, to really get to where you need to be. And this way, that's what makes you unique, right? And that's why you bring what you bring out, which others can't. So, really, really great speaking with you today, Mrs. Lambropoulos. I think we are out of time. I will allow the concluding remarks. I don't see any additional questions from the public, so we'll go from here. Very interesting for me. I've learned a lot. I appreciate all the insight that you've shared with us.
Thank you so much for being a great questioner slash hostess, Tara.